April 1st is coming up, and that means it's that time again where everyone is playing pranks and fooling people. And for Minecraft players, we know Mojang is cooking something up. In previous years, all the way from 2011, Mojang has pulled some sort of April Fool's joke on the community. If it's something in the Minecraft launcher on PC or an entire new potato dimension, it's pretty much confirmed once again that this year we'll get something new. And I want to try and predict what it could be. But first, we have to take a trip down memory lane and dive into the history of these April Fool's updates. Now, before we begin, make sure to subscribe, it would help us out a lot. First, we go to 2011. This is the first year that Minecraft actually pulled some sort of April Fool's joke. And of course, it's one of the early years of Minecraft, as it released in 2009. This one was called the Minecraft Store, and was pretty interesting. What's really cool about Minecraft is, of course, you can go back to these versions and different snapshots. This one took place on Java 1.4. And according to the Minecraft wiki, you actually have to put your time back to April 1st, and because it can only happen at April 1st. So I changed the date all the way to 2011 April 1st, expecting something to happen. However, you were supposed to find random chests that would spawn, however, I wasn't able to find it. They would sort of look like these. They would be called locked chests, and when you clicked on it, they would pull up this screen. Going to the store would take you to the Minecraft store, where you could buy different items and proceed to checkout. This of course was a very long time ago, so some of the pictures aren't the best, but it's pretty cool. However, going to the same link that it gave you before, it actually doesn't work anymore, which sort of does make sense. It just says, oops, we couldn't find this page. And going to the Internet Archive or the Wayback Machine, you can actually sort of get to the page. However, it's very different from what it originally was, and like I said, it doesn't really work anymore, which does make sense because of course it's from 2011. But essentially, you could buy different items using money, which wasn't actually real life money, but it was pretty interesting. 2012 was relatively small and didn't really have much to do with Minecraft. They just announced a new game called Mars Effect, which actually turned out to be a real game that was cancelled later on. Now, 2013. This next one was very hard to access, and I actually wasn't able to access it, as this one was an actual new version called Minecraft 2.0. This version had a few new things referencing a few different type of YouTubers. This one was typically only sent to YouTubers and is very hard to access now. There are things like the Ethos slab or a burnt out torch. There's also a coal block, which was actually later on implemented, which is pretty funny, and same with tinted glass. There is also the pink wither, which actually made a return later on, which we'll get to. And there's a lot of other cool things like the redstone bug, diamond chicken, and some other cool things. Moving on, 2014. This year, unlike 2013, didn't really have a full version. And we can't really access this one either, as it was only on April 1st and you can't go back. However, basically everyone's skins were changed into a different villager, which was pretty interesting. And also, one of the developers for Pocket Edition posted this picture of Steve playing basketball, which was pretty interesting. Now, 2015. 2015 had a pretty big April Fool's update, and it was called the Love and Hugs update, and it was pretty interesting. So as you can see, this is sort of a snapshot as it was called 15W14A, which of course was the old name for these snapshots, and there's some pretty interesting things. For example, the super secret settings, which plays some interesting sounds. And some interesting things when creating the world. The world name will be There Can Only Be One, and there's two game modes, Existence, which is basically just survival, and Creative mode. So quickly allowing superpowers, let's create the world. So this code can just be explored by going to this older version. And there's already some pretty interesting things. First of all, we can see that we only have one heart and it's centered. And I don't know if this is just how it was back then, but everything feels more vibrant. But I think this is just this version. There's also something interesting like some sort of heart that you can craft according to the achievements menu. And of course there's hearts in the water, which definitely resembles this type of love update. So after making a crafting bench, I was able to figure out that we actually have to make a sword, which was actually now a wooden heart instead of a wooden sword, which upon crafting, I couldn't really do anything with it. And there also seems to be some sort of heart in the sky instead of normal clouds, and some snow, interestingly enough. Oh, and I think we unlocked another heart, so I'm not sure how we got that. And it seems like we can make all types of different hearts. And we also unlocked another heart, so maybe it's based on how much of these you craft. So we do have a stone heart now. And after eating something, now there's a lot of hearts around us. And this is apparently intentional. There were also flying squids, which was pretty interesting. And definitely very confusing. So after some testing, I figured out that there's two ways to earn hearts. You have to either get damaged by falling or punching mobs. And as you can see, we got some hearts. Now, moving on to some of the new things in this update, if that's what you even call it, we got the obsidian boat, which is not very useful and completely sinks because, well, it's very heavy because it's obsidian. And as you can see, we are just sinking more and more down into the ocean, which is pretty interesting. And definitely very useless. We also got 2 new potions, which don't really work on us and only work on mobs. So we have a smiling creeper. And after using one of the potions where all the effects are hearts, okay, so that just exploded into flowers. Apparently, according to the Minecraft wiki, when you splash it upon a mob, it goes towards another mob as if it's going to attack them like a player. However, it typically doesn't actually attack them. And the potion of sharing actually makes mobs drop items. Oh, it's gonna explode? Okay. Well, it seems like the creepers just randomly explode into roses. And as you can see, after putting the potion of sharing, which you'll know by the hearts coming out of the zombie or whatever mob, they'll drop random items like lapis, iron, and I don't know if it's tied to which type of mob. Like zombies normally spawn in caves, so it's giving things that you would need in a cave like coal or pickaxes. That's pretty cool. There's also some other small changes like heart banners and boats with a hole in them of a heart shape, which is also very useless, but when you get out of it, it just immediately goes back up, so pretty interesting. And we also got heart-shaped arrows, which are similar to just normal arrows, but will give you another heart. And of course, the creeper heads are smiling, and TNT, of course, won't explode, so you can't really do much that will cause any danger to your world. However, you can spawn the wither, which instead of being a normal wither, it's gonna be pink, of course, because this is, of course, a love update, and we'll have hearts around it, and we'll be smiling, which is very similar to the pink wither in the 2.0 update. And of course, the health bar, I don't know if this is normal, but normally it's purple, but here it's pink. I don't know if this is just before they change it to purple. But we do also have the love golem. And this may have teased or maybe been an inspiration for the happy gas, but you can ride gas, which is pretty interesting. However, you can't control it because, well, you don't have a harness. Now, they also changed some structures like dungeons where it'll now be called a house, which has a chest with normal loot and a crafting table. And of course, we'll have a spawner and made out of quartz, which is pretty interesting. Now, one of the coolest things is that snow will spawn anywhere. However, it's not random. And all over your world, you might notice that there is snow, but like I said, it's actually making a pattern. So after some more testing, we also have the splash potion of love, which is basically like instant damage, and this will eventually give you some more hearts. And of course, you can also reset the world because you only get 1. There's some other cool pictures like a horse riding a player and mobs holding the wooden heart. But if you get 8 rows of hearts, something interesting happens. You unlock Minesweeper, which is basically just a play on Minesweeper. And of course, it's very similar to normal Minesweeper, and definitely very hard to get if you're playing in normal survival. But this is just another really cool small thing. So now about that snow, this would reveal a QR code, which here's the full QR code on the screen, which takes you to a search engine and types in Minecraft 1.9, the combat update, which is pretty interesting. And you might be wondering why it would be this, but it is teasing the combat update as it came out next year. So it's pretty interesting. Moving on, 2016. This update was called the Trendy update, and sort of went with the 2015 update as an actual new version. This one was called 1RV Pre-1. The first new thing in this update was the USB block, which can easily be crafted with some iron, gold, and redstone, and it basically works the exact same as a redstone block, just a bit harder to craft, and doesn't really serve any other function. We also got reality vision, which can be put in your head slot, and basically just puts a view of your map, which is pretty interesting, and of course updates whenever you do anything or move. So building something in the water, you can somewhat tell that there definitely is something new over there, but it definitely is very hard to see. We also get the ankle monitor, which is sort of like a normal one where you have to go to spawn during the night. And as you can see over there, it says you are violating your house arrest, get back by 28 meters, which is just 28 blocks. So since it says curfew warning, that basically just means you have to get to your house or spawn, wherever you're spawning, like a bed, by nighttime so you can sleep. And as you can see, it is getting shorter to wherever you spawned originally. Or, like I said, your bed. Some other cool things is that zombies and creepers or some other mobs will spawn with these visors on, and they won't be able to see you because they're wearing these. Now, last item is some sort of smartwatch, which will basically update you on statistics that are changing. For For example, it says distance flown is now 800, and it also shows us the time. And of course, you can wear all of these at the exact same time, which makes you look pretty interesting. And of course, when you die, well, you lose all of it. So what's also pretty interesting is that you can actually fall to this sort of invisible world. As you can see, if you break down to bedrock, you'll actually be able to fall to it and die. There are also some other pretty cool things, like the signs where it looks a bit more futuristic, and when you're wearing the visors, it'll say obey, which is a reference. Moving on, 2017. This one was moving away from the updates every year and had a new parody called the Minecraft Digital Leisure Device, which you might be asking what is it a parody of, but you can tell pretty quickly. So here's a quick trailer for it.
Feel the game with our superbly tactile action buttons. Our advanced digital audio will take your breath away. Survive in extreme wilderness in unparalleled resolution thanks to the highest quality pixels anybody has ever seen.
So of course this was a parody of the Nintendo Game & Watch, and it's a really cool concept. And it's pretty funny that they did make this, and really cool. And of course they look quite similar. Now, moving on, 2018. This was another update in the game called the Texture Update. This update just changed some textures and basically made it look pretty interesting. However, you cannot access this update anymore as they fully reverted it, meaning that you can't even go to April 1st on this year. Now, 2019. This update was called the 3D Shareware version 1.34 update. And already from the cover art, it is pretty interesting. Even the loading screen changed to something pretty interesting too. And already this is weird. As you can see, there's something that says 3D. And of course, there's some pretty interesting things down there, and we have to select an episode instead of making a world. And the first episode is The Player Is You, where you can select a different difficulty like Hello Noobville or Lemon Curry, or all the way to Nightmare Mode, which is pretty interesting. And this one I don't really understand, and you'll see why. Right when you start moving, you will instantly take damage, and I'm not sure if you're supposed to just sort of survive. You just can't really do anything. There's these floating barrels that are on fire, and some other things. But we also blew up, and it was very confusing. And there's also this, which I'm not really sure what it means, but this version was pretty confusing. However, reloading the game, we were able to choose an easier difficulty so that we could actually see what's going on. So as you can see, I'm guessing these barrels will explode when you take everything out of them. And they have some pretty good... Yep, there we go. As you can see, I took everything out and I exploded. And they do have some pretty good loot, like mostly armor, potions, or weapons. And the texture is pretty weird. And there's some barrels over here too that are on fire. And yeah, I'm not going to take that out because it's definitely going to explode again. Oh, next disc required. Okay, enter disc 22 into drive A and press enter. Okay. Okay, so nothing happened. You could just press enter, so you didn't really have to do anything. Okay, I'm guessing that's another reference to maybe something else. And I'm guessing this is a reference to older games like Doom or stuff like that. We also got this red key, which I'm not sure what it does. And this next thing is definitely a reference to some older games, and it's the cheat codes. If you put certain cheat codes like power overwhelming, you'll be invincible. And you can put pigs on the wings, where you'll be able to fly infinitely even in survival mode. And for some reason, pressing F7 or F8, you'll be able to make your screen smaller or bigger. And there's even one that makes this pretty interesting creeper, which I'm not sure what it does. And this creeper is looking pretty 2D. Also, by pressing B, you'll get this, which I'm not sure what this is a reference to, and definitely is a reference to something. And this version was pretty cool and really well made, and it's definitely one of my favorites. There's also some other things that you can access, like this picture of the Mojang team, and this other thing where you can actually get the 3D block. Now moving on to 2020. This update was called 20W14 Infinite, and you might be wondering why is it infinite, but you'll see why soon. This update was a pretty big one, and was of course during the Nether update. So as you can see, nothing changed at first. However, all the blocks are completely random, and there is a new one, Box of Infinite Books, which just has some gibberish once you get a book from it. And of course you can get the exact same book, which has some gibberish too on it. And this, I'm guessing, is some sort of code that is directly used when you make another portal and throw it inside. Now as you can see, it's a different color. You might be wondering, what does this do? And you'll see soon. So all these different bookshelves have different colors and drop different types of books, which I'm guessing is some internal code that basically changes what type of portal it's going to be. And of course, we change the portal color again, and you can basically just do this infinitely. But that's not the only thing. So going inside, we see that it's clearly not the Nether and some pretty weird world. And as you can see, this world is sort of made up of the same things, like pots, acacia, and some other things like ancient debris. And we also have some random chests, which has some random loot, which I'm guessing these are considered structures, as since some of them have a torch beside them, these seem very similar to the starting chests. And of course, we can throw a book while we're in this area to go to a different place. And this next place is in some sort of cave, and there's definitely a lot of smoke, so it's pretty interesting. And there's a lot of glass and some purpur. Oh, yep, that's definitely purpur. That's just a ton of end ships, and there's withers everywhere. So I'm not really sure how the code works on this, but I'm guessing it spawns just the same type of structure, or it's themed to certain things, as I saw an end gateway here too. And this is definitely one of the coolest ones that there have been, and one of the most complicated it seems. And even this end ship is just cut off, and there's a ton of glass, particles, and so much going on here. Now this different one is pretty weird. Here a lot of the blocks are different colors, like the quartz pillars, which are completely green, and just textures seem to be pretty weird here. And I'm guessing this is green concrete, I'm not too sure. And these worlds are pretty much infinite, and apparently there are 2 billion different dimensions, making this one of the biggest that they've done. So, like I said, this was one of the biggest that they've done, and was one of the coolest ones that they've done. And here are some other examples of what could have been there, and there's even a netherite stair, which I wasn't able to find. Moving on, 2021. 2021 was a bit smaller, as this one didn't have a new version. The only new thing was a play on the original Microsoft Windows 95 Microsoft Plus, and we got Minecraft Plus instead, which released some pretty cool wallpapers, and that's basically it. So it's a pretty interesting one, and definitely a bit smaller than the previous ones. Moving on, 2022. 2022 had a new version, and it was called 22W13 one block at a time. And it's really interesting. As you can see, you don't have an inventory, and you can see both of your hands, which is of course not normal for Minecraft. And as you can already see, we can basically just pick up blocks and throw them. This is very different from normal Minecraft, as normally you can put them all in your inventory, but this time you can only hold one block at a time, like the name states. And you can also throw these blocks around, which is also pretty cool. And you don't really need silk touch or things like that on your tools, because you can really just pick up anything and throw it too. However, there's some other cool things with this. You can also pick up mobs, as you can see I'm picking up a pig, and you can even throw them too. However, they will take damage. And this makes this version very hard to beat, because you can't really have a full inventory, which makes things like beating the game really hard. Also, there's some other cool things, like of course you can pick up end portal frames, and they're pretty weird. And also, when you find a stronghold, there'll only be one end portal frame, meaning that you have to find 11 other end portal frames. So because it would take a while, let's just summon some and create a end portal. And this is pretty weird. I don't know if this is intentional, but let's just go in. So as you can see, of course, you go to the end like normal. However, all the Endermen are actually holding random blocks, which once again is pretty cool. And of course it's not normal, and you can even pick them up and throw them too. Now, this is the most interesting thing. However, there's some setup to this. You have to destroy most of the end crystals, so by grabbing a different block and throwing it right at the end crystal, you'll be able to destroy it. Make sure not to actually pick up the end crystal, because that's not what you're supposed to do. As you can see, just throwing a block at it destroys it. And in this case, we're holding bedrock. And there's some pretty cool explosion things, like all of those blocks being sent so far away. And eventually, you'll be able to actually ride the dragon. Instead of holding the dragon, and you'll actually be able to fly it around, and you'll actually be able to move it. Typically, like in a previous one, you were able to fly on normal ghast, but you wouldn't be able to move it around, but here you can actually move it around. And apparently I'm wearing a bedrock block right now, which I'm not sure how I did, but this update is very cool. And this is of course the cover art for one block at a time, and it's definitely very hard to beat, but very cool with the riding the Ender Dragon. Moving on, 2023. 2023 was also a big one, and it was called 23W13A or B. And this one, like the name suggests, you have to vote for things. So, for example, we got a first proposal, which was persistent parrots, they will never leave you. So you can vote on it or do nothing. And for example, this one I'll vote on. And of course, this is usually meant for a server or something like that, where the time is actually for 9 minutes. However, there's some other pretty cool things in this, where you actually be able to fly above Y700 and go to space. However, it is a little bit finicky, as sometimes when you go back down or up, it will just teleport you back to the overworld, and it's just pretty interesting. However, there is something cool at this. If you do go down, you actually eventually be able to find the moon. As you can see, we can see the square earth down there, and after some testing, I was able to find the moon, which is a little bit similar to how the end looks, as the blocks, instead of being end stone, they're actually called cheese, which is pretty interesting. And the only problem with this is that you will suffocate. As you can see, there's some air bubbles, which you'll definitely need some pretty interesting things that have to do with the voting. As you can see, the end stone and cheese look pretty similar, but still it's very cool that they added a new dimension. And of course, you can do this command, as you can see right here, and approve different things. And essentially that was this whole April Fool's thing, where you basically were able to vote on different things, and some pretty interesting things would happen. Another interesting thing is that you're actually able to turn into different mobs. For some reason, this one, called the Potion of Ray Tracing, turned you into a different skin, and I'm not sure exactly why, but there's some other pretty cool ones, like the Potion of the Enderman, which of course turns you into an Enderman, and I don't think you can actually use their abilities, but it's still very cool. And you can even turn into the Ender Dragon. And they also did some things on the launcher, like there are all these chickens, and the launcher was on fire. There's also some other pretty cool things, like the moon being big, and some sort of aether portal. Now, the next two are probably some of the biggest that they've ever done. We have 2024. This one was 24W14 Potato, and you might be wondering, what does this mean? Well, it's the Poisonous Potato update. They added some pretty cool things like this special font, and this basically added a new dimension. As you can see loading on to a new world, you wouldn't notice much at first, but if you go to starter chest, you'll notice something. There's some poisonous potatoes, and they're called poisonous potato plant, which looks pretty interesting while you're holding it. And this is one of the biggest ones, and definitely would take a very long time to explore this thing, so we'll speedrun this a little bit in creative mode. If you get this special pedestal, you'll actually be able to teleport to an entirely new dimension and get a new achievement, Non Plus Ultra. And like I said, this would take very long to find, and is an entire new mode basically, adding so much to explore. There's these new type of structures or villages with a maze, and a ton of new blocks based around potatoes, which is pretty interesting. And they also did some other small things, like they updated the fletching table with some pretty interesting dialogue that doesn't really make sense. And there's even potato elytras, making this a really cool dimension. And it may look a little bit similar to how the end generates, but still, it's really cool. And there are some structures that normally spawn in the overworld, like mine shafts or amethyst geodes. And they also added a ton of new mobs, and they even added a new boss, which definitely does a lot of damage. Going in survival mode, as you can see, yeah, it does nearly half my health in one hit. And all these mobs are really cool, and you should definitely try exploring it. And once again, this would take very long to go over every single new feature, as there's an entire new tab added to this with all the new blocks. And as you can see, the new boss's name is Mega Spud, and definitely does a lot of damage. However, something really cool is that when you completely dive bomb into the void, you might think that you die, but something different happens. And I did expect that I would die, but I didn't. As you can see, you teleport somewhere, which is back to the overworld, where you have some potato shoes, and you basically cause this impact with poisonous mashed potatoes, which once again is pretty interesting. And now we're back on the surface. There definitely is a ton of new things in this update, and it is worth checking it out. Now, they also changed some things in the launcher that also has to do with potatoes, and they also changed the font to the potato font. Now, moving on to 2025, another big one. This one was called 25W14 Craftmine. So, before going in, there's a new game in the launcher called Launchcraft. As you can see, it's pretty interesting. Now, in Craftmine, which is basically just the opposite of Minecraft, is basically another new type of game mode. As you can see, when you load on, you can't actually access creative mode unless you use commands. And instead of spawning in a normal area, you actually spawn in some new area, making this technically a new game mode. So, this works in a level system. The levels are called mines, and you can basically put ingredients into it to change how the mine is going to look. As you can see, we can add in this type and get mine 1. and there's some other pretty cool things in this, and I just fell into the void. But as you can see, we are entering a mine now, and it's pretty cool. And it definitely is very aggressive when you're loading in. Now, as you can see, it looks like a normal world. However, in the top left, there's some of the special things in this world and some other things. And like I said, it looks pretty normal. However, if we do /kill, we have to accept defeat, and we fail the mine, getting a failed mine 1 item. So let's try this again and actually do it. Once again, this would take a very long time to do because you actually have to search through these newly generated worlds to find one of these things where you can exit the mine. And as you can see, we get some XP and we can use it to level up. And you can level up in so many different ways, and once you get a mine, you can actually place it somewhere to go back to it. As you can see, we can revisit a mine, and there's not much you can do here except just look at the actual place. Now, going back to a mine, how the XP works is that different items that you collect have different values. For example, ancient debris has a value of 2, which is important because if we give ourselves a lot of stacks of ancient debris and some mace, which has a value of 10, upon exiting we get a ton of levels, which of course this technically is not allowed, and you need creative mode for this. But just to show you, there are so many different types of abilities that you can unlock, like learning a lot of jumping, and there's just so many cool things. And from what I saw, this area where you can store these mines goes for pretty much infinite. After traveling for quite a while, there seems to be really no end of it. And now moving on, 2026. So, this part, of course, there's no actual version for 2026 yet for April Fools, and I have 3 ideas on what it could be. So, based on a few different things like the Trendy update or things like that, I feel it could be something that's currently popular in the Minecraft community. This could be the end update, which many people have been wanting, or something to do with people typing fixed bedrock mojang or fixed bedrock mojang, or even just fixed mojang bedrock, which I don't even know why people are still typing these in the mojang posts, and yeah, if you know, let me know. I feel like Mojang could sort of tie things like the end update into some sort of April Fool's update and just basically play a prank on people and get their hopes up for something to do with the end update. People have been connecting nearly every post that Mojang has made to the end update. Now, my second prediction, I'm not sure if this will actually happen. I feel like they could do something a bit more scary. As you know, if you've ever played the older version of Minecraft, you definitely know that it feels a little bit off, especially when you're going back compared to now. There definitely were a lot of different things that came out of it, like of course this picture with Herobrine in it, and there's a lot of things that are meant to be creepy, like the creaking in the pale oak forest, which is definitely pretty interesting. And I think they could do something a bit more scary, and there's been a lot of popularity in people playing scary maps, so I feel like I wouldn't be too surprised if they did something a bit more scary. Now, my last prediction is the one I'm hoping that doesn't happen. I feel like that possibly based on the last 2 years, we got Craftmine and the Poison Potato update, which were pretty big, and this led to people saying that Mojang basically puts more effort into these than their actual updates. And in some cases, you might be able to look at these as more effort than the recent updates, but I feel like these April Fool's things are things that Mojang want to do without actually adding it to the game because there'd be a lot of controversy with it. If there was an entire new potato dimension, I feel like a lot of people would say that it's lazy or things like that, and a lot of these things feel like more just things Mojang wanted to do instead of things that actually fit in the game, because an entire potato dimension just would be pretty weird in Minecraft. And I feel like these are good that they're saved for the April Fool's updates, and even though sometimes it might look that it's more effort than normal updates, I feel like these April Fool's updates sometimes are not too hard to make. But back on topic, this update compared to the last 2 might be a bit smaller, like the Minecraft Plus update or the parody on the Game & Watch. Or they could do something in the actual game like the texture update, but it would be a bit smaller. And I honestly would not be surprised if this one's a bit smaller, like I said, based on the last 2 updates. And even though I wouldn't want that to happen, I feel like I would want something bigger. I honestly think that's probably what's going to happen. So those are my 3 predictions. To just wrap up, I think that possibly they might do something that is currently trending, like the end update. Or they might do something a bit more scary, because there's been a recent surge in popularity in scary maps. Or they might just do something smaller, because in the past 2 years they did some pretty big things. And it might just be a bit smaller, like the Minecraft launcher, or just some pretty funny joke. So now, let us know, what are your predictions for this April Fool's update? And do you think it's going to be big, or do you think it's going to be a bit smaller? Let us know. And make sure to subscribe for more videos like this.